Welcome to the Stash Cast, where innovation meets real estate. Let's dive in.
Lee, thank you so much for coming to join me today.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. You and I have had a bit of interaction, but this is really the first time for us meeting. But I know who you are, but for the listeners at home, why don't you give us a quick background of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Lee Hoffman. I've been building technology companies, startups for 20 plus years now. I always joke that if there's a way to bomb or mess up a startup, I've done it at least once, if not twice or three times at some point along the way. Have been fortunate enough to have some successes. My last company ended up in the wedding tech space and sold to the Knot. And my current company, Runwise, makes the smart technology that runs the heating, cooling, water, electric, all the core systems in over 10,000 buildings. And it does it in a way that's much more intelligent, much more energy efficient, a lot better for the environment, a lot easier to manage, a lot safer, more comfortable buildings. You can think of it like a modern operating system for buildings.
That's a lot to unpack, and I'm curious about all of it. How many startups have you been a part of?
Oh man. It's hard to say because if you're an entrepreneur, you're always working on something, and some of them may never become a company or anything, but you work on something for a few months, you realize it's going nowhere, and you're like, okay, this is not a thing. But I've definitely worked on probably 20 plus projects, and more formally, at least 4 or 5 startups.
Huh. Interesting. So I guess, how did you decide to get into the building tech space? Because on the face of it, it's kind of niche, but then when you think about it, it's really not, because every building, you're based in New York, so every building, you guys have a lot of product with boilers and chillers and central cooling towers, whereas you don't really see that as much in my market in the Midwest, but you do see it up in Cleveland and the more northeasterly markets. So where did it come from? How'd you stumble upon it?
Are you saying every little kid in the country doesn't grow up and hope that they can make boilers and chillers more energy efficient? What? I was doing startup stuff, and a friend of mine from Brown, my co-founder Jeff, went off into the real estate world, and he was managing 150, ended up managing 150 multifamily buildings for a single owner in New York City. And he just saw firsthand, basically incredibly antiquated tech from the 70s was running every single building in New York City, brand new, old, didn't matter. It was all running on literally the stuff that the space shuttle in the 1970s was probably running off of. And he went out and he said, this has got to be solvable. And he looked at everything that was on the market, and everything was insanely expensive. And then when he put it in, it really didn't reduce the energy costs. And it was just crazy to him. And he was like, this has got to be solvable. And I think the thing that really propelled our business and has been the core of our DNA is that if you really want to run buildings using modern technology in a more energy efficient way, in a more intelligent way, this transition has happened in every other industry. But the reason it hasn't happened in buildings and in real estate is just the ROI of doing it hasn't been there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want 12 million buildings in the United States, 50 million buildings globally to upgrade their operating system, it can't be something that you go to the owner and say, hey, this will pay for itself in 10 years. And that the economics are so wild that the owner has to pay attention, because otherwise it's impossible to get them to do anything. And that's really where we started from. We ended up building vertically integrated hardware and software. You can think of it like Apple integrates the hardware and the software for the phone. Tesla does it for cars. This transition of hardware and software that mesh together and transform an industry happened in telecom, happened in cars, and now it's finally happening in buildings.
The Stash Cast is brought to you by Needle. What if you could use data and analytics to predict real estate transactions? With Needle, you can. Check it out at needle.us to learn more.
We built literally vertically integrated hardware down to silicon chips that power a wireless protocol that vastly outperforms every other wireless technology ever put into buildings, that allow us to take what historically would be like a 3-week install for a Honeywell or a Johnson's or a Siemens with people with trade skills that are incredibly expensive, standing on ladders all day long. And we've turned it into something that's completely wireless, 100% battery powered. Every battery lasts 10 years. And we're in and out of the average building in 4 hours or less. So just dramatic reduction in costs. And then the average building we touch, we reduce the energy usage by 21.2%. So huge economic reduction in cost, which means that in most buildings, you put our technology in, it pays for itself in just a few months, and then you're making 4 or 5 times on your money every single year afterwards. And that is the kind of secret sauce that gets owners to really pay attention and actually try it. And then once they try it, they realize, holy cow, I can't imagine going back to running my building on 1970s technology, like at not having algorithms making decisions, not being able to see what's happening in every single system in every one of my buildings on my iPhone and my Android, not detecting problems within seconds instead of 3 days later when a pipe is leaking into 7 apartments. That is literally how every building in the world operates today if it's not using Runwise. And that has really been our secret sauce. And we're in about 10,000 buildings, but still a tiny slice of the 12 million in the United States and 50 million globally. And part of the reason I think we're growing so quickly is that I think owners increasingly are realizing that the time is now to upgrade to a modern operating system.
Yeah, you touched on something earlier about essentially real estate being very slow to adopt and adapt to new technologies. And it sounds like you've made it dummy proof.
Essentially, yeah. If you look at real estate, it's about 20 years historically behind every other industry and technology, right? You order a pizza from Domino's, my co-founder always says this, you literally know where the pizza is every second of the trip, right? And you might have a building filled with 5,000 people with a $20 million a year energy budget. And literally the thing is running off of a timer from the 70s, right? With no visibility over the internet, have no idea when there's like a massive issue that's like potentially going to hurt people or like slowly destroy the building. It's crazy. And the reason is just real estate owners are like, real estate is under tremendous economic pressure. Real estate owners and operators are not the type that are sitting at their desks. They're dealing with a million issues. The roof caved in on this building. There's 26 apartments that are costing me $26,000 a month in empty rent. There's 500 new city local laws that they have to apply to. And if they don't hit them exactly on the date it's required, they get huge penalties. So then it comes down to, let's look at what kind of technology we're using. And it's like the 20th thing they're looking at. And the only way to get them to pay attention is really to make the economic incentive so insane that they literally can't not look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like a no-brainer and kind of a dummy sales pitch to be able to make. You're like, hey, we can, not only is it going to save you a ton of money, it's relatively inexpensive as compared to traditional installs. And it's all upside. So why wouldn't you try it?
Yeah, I'm going to let you do our sales pitches from now on.
So you had your roommate from college who got into the real estate management, and he saw an issue. And what did he do? Call you up and say, hey, Lee, let's build a solution? Like, how did it come about?
I'm not far off from that. Essentially, it's like, there's a problem here. It took us many iterations to figure out to get where we are. Like, we started with just software that would analyze the energy patterns in buildings. Then we were like, okay, but like, we got to actually make changes. So we would try to like work with the idea of building your own like hardware and computer, and it was crazy. So we were like, all right, all these buildings have some kind of control from the 70s. I wonder if, no joke, we could get like 1,000 phone lines and call into those computers over the phone lines and make controls changes. So we started doing that, and like that just hit a limitation. Plus a lot of these didn't even have that ability. Then finally, we're like, I wonder if we could build our own control, and could we do it at 1/10 or 1/20th the cost of the existing controls? And then we got the control out there, and we started looking at the time and cost of putting it in. And like, we're spending huge amounts of time on using the best wireless technology on the market that would require a hardwired repeater, meaning like an electrician on a ladder for 45 minutes every 2 to 3 floors. And then the sensors themselves, the batteries only lasted 3 years, and we got to 1,000 buildings, and you had 10 sensors per building. You're replacing 3,000 or 4,000 batteries in apartments every year. It was just like totally hamstringing the business. And so we said, I wonder if we could hire like wireless protocol engineers. And we went out and we found some incredible guys that were like the best of the best at this. And we said, okay, We need to be able to install a wireless network that covers a 50-story building. We need the repeaters to go 6 stories. Each repeater has to be battery powered, so no electrical, no electricians, literally just 2 screws on the wall. Oh, and those repeaters on the batteries need to last 10 years. And all the batteries and the sensors also need to last 10 years. And here's the cost that we need each of these devices to be. Make it work. It took many years to make that work, but eventually it did. And now, we go into a building and literally in an hour or two, you have wireless signal blanketing the entire building that'll last 10 years. We have control devices and sensors throughout the building in another hour. We're taking over the heating system, the cooling system, the gas, the electric, another hour, and then we're out. And we don't come back for 10 years.
That's amazing. How did you get a battery that lasts that long?
It's very clever engineering of the wireless protocol. And the very long story short is essentially what it does is we created a very high powered wireless signal, but it sleeps for 99.99% of the time and just wakes up for a microsecond, transmits messages, and then sleeps again. And because you're doing that in such a short broadcast, jumping over many different frequencies to comply with the FCC regulations in the United States, you can get a very high-powered, long-range in buildings and very low battery power usage.
I have no idea what you just said, but it sounds amazing. So you had the first client, right? Essentially from your partner, and he could make a value prop or sales pitch to his the owner of the buildings. This group took a chance on you guys, and then how did you then go and build from there? Like, it seems like such an incredible uphill battle that you had to overcome, and how'd you do it?
My co-founders literally one by one went person by person. Who do you know? Let us to try it on one building. Let me show you the results. And there were a lot of hiccups along the way. The first version of the control, like we had 50% of them were offline, like at one point in the first year, right? Hardware is really hard, but you do it. And then finally you start, reducing because people look at their energy bill. They're like, holy crap, it's 20% lower. I mean, that's mind blowing, right? And a small percentage of that spent to do it. And people are like, holy cow. And then they start saying, yeah, let's do it in all my buildings. So have you talked to this guy? And then you're hire a sales team, and when you make all the mistakes, they don't sell anything. You're like, why aren't they selling anything? If we can sell X, why can't they? And then you start to realize you need to actually mechanize it, and you need to have a team that does outreach, and then the person that closes, and you figure out what the script is and how they say it, all the objections, and you put systems in place, and piece by piece, it just starts to grows and grows.
Yeah. So how did you fund it?
We bootstrapped it for the first few years, literally off of the revenue.
Yeah.
And I think we raised our seed round when we had $1 million in recurring revenue already. So we literally bootstrapped it to the first $1 million. Yeah.
Wow. How much spend did it take you to get to that first $1 million?
Oh man, we certainly it wasn't spend in the traditional sense of invested dollars, because we literally had no invested dollars.
Right. But if you could quantify it.
We probably put in of our own money at maybe 120K, and then just our time.
Hours.
And it took years to get to that first $1 million, probably 4 or 5 years. And then finally we raised the seed round, and then an A, and then recently a B. But yeah.
Wow. So I guess on the subject of funding, how has your experience been with, I assume it's venture capital that you've been funded with?
Yep.
Have you gotten a lot of, we don't see the value here thing, or are they just, here's my checkbook, how much do you want?
I'm sure there are some startups that have that experience. I've never had that experience. I've raised many rounds over many companies. I have a whole playbook on raising money that I've developed over time, but essentially there was an amazing blog post by this guy, Eric Paley, who was a partner of Founder Collective, and he funded one of my very long time ago companies. And it's an amazing post because he said, the whole post is, here's what your perception of your probability of getting a term sheet and getting money from this investor is at each stage of the funnel. And here's what it actually is. And it's you get intro to a partner at a venture capital fund, and he's really excited about what you're doing. 50% probability I'm going to get funded. And actually it's 1% probability, right? All the way down to I have a term sheet that's signed. 100% I'm getting funded. Actually, it's 80%. Right. And so if you just look at it, like the average VC looks at 300 plus deals a year and does 3 to 4, maybe. So your odds are incredibly against you. So the only way to level the odds is you have to flip the playbook. I do 120 firms in 6 weeks. And the goal is to get as many to term sheet stage at the same time. And then you have negotiating leverage to turn multiple term sheets into the best terms with the people that you actually want to work with. And that's what I do every time I raise. And it's grueling, totally emotionally and physically brutal. You're doing, think about 120 firms. You're doing the initial meetings in a few weeks. Like that's a full 9 to, in Eastern time, 7 or 8 o'clock schedule, because like people on West Coast will meet you at 8 o'clock, right? It's only 5 p.m. their time. Then at 9 o'clock, you're spending from 9 to 12, you're writing essay responses to every single one of the diligence questions, every single person you met with. And you're doing that day after day for week after week with 0 people saying yes. And through the process, more and more people are just saying no. So you're literally just working, grueling, like grinding yourself into the ground to get person after person to person saying no. And you just have to have faith. And you still have to believe that your like thing is the greatest thing ever, because even though every single person is telling you no for like valid reasons, right? But you just have to keep going. And then hopefully you get one person breaks the dam and they can give you a term sheet. And then you go back to everyone and you're like, hey, I got a term sheet. If you're going to do this, now's the time. And you hopefully can use that to get some leverage, to get some good terms and the people you really want to work with.
And that you do have a competitive process, like you've just articulated. What are the things that you're looking for from a VC relationship over and above just money? Or is it just the money that you want and hey,
you
leave me alone?
Obviously you want to get good terms, right? So like that matters. But I think it's equally important to get somebody that you like want to work with, because it's like entering a marriage, right? Especially if they're going to have a board seat or voting rights. So you want to make sure it's somebody who's high integrity, has the same vision that you do and the same time span. And then it's helpful if they have some brand, because they have something to lose, right? If they do something that's unethical or shitty, it could hurt their brand, right? Not a requirement, but that's a nice to have. And you put those things together and it's a little bit like dating. You just try to find somebody that you like really want to spend time with.
So what are some of the mistakes that you've made in some of the startups that you've been a part of?
Oh my God, I made every mistake possible. I'm both a designer and an engineer and a product person. So I definitely on my first startup spent way too much time perfecting every pixel and line of code, and instead of getting it out in front of people. I learned that the hard way. I gave you an example, even as you get to a later stage where you're like, you have $1 million or $2 million in ARR, and you're like, if the 3 founders can sell X a year, if we hire 3 salespeople, we should be able to sell 2X. And then you realize, no, it doesn't work like that, right? You have to actually build like a machinery and almost like an assembly line for sales.
And is that because they don't know it as well inside and out? What are the challenges? Because I've got a sales background.
I think it's like what the founders do to sell isn't necessarily always replicable, right? How does my co-founder sell? He'll go into a building with 20 years of knowledge of running buildings, and he'll go in and he'll ask questions about the building, and he'll talk about, like, he'll walk over. Have you ever seen condensate under this pipe? Oh, that probably means that, you have distribution issues over here. Like, he just has so much knowledge that like you're buying him, right? You're like, oh yeah, like he knows everything about buildings, right? And it took me and my other co-founder 10 years to get to a place like that. But we could sell off of that, right? I don't need to sell directly off the product. I can literally just show that I'm an expert and then say, hey, let me tell you why this is better. Somebody who's you have to take off the street and a month later has to sell $1 million over the next year can't do that, right?
No.
So you have to constrain it. And then do you really want the top seller making cold calls all day to feed their own pipeline? Probably not, right? So then you have to take somebody who has even less experience in sales, and like, how can you take somebody with like virtually no experience in sales and like within 2 weeks get them delivering 30 qualified meetings a month? You have to figure out what is the script, what are all the objections they could possibly handle. You have to teach them how to act out that role. I did that for 3 months. I figured out a script that dramatically performs, that's generated millions in ARR for the company now. So like you have to mechanize it and then you have to put great people into the machine, but you need the machine.
Yeah. That's fascinating. What was your first startup?
My first startup ever was I had the craziest idea in 1998. The idea was that all of your word processing, presentations, spreadsheets wouldn't be done on your computer locally. They would be done in a web browser. And all of those documents would be stored not on your computer or a server in your office, but on the internet. And I was like 18 years old or 19 years old. And I was in New York and I like had no relationships in California. There was no startup ecosystem virtually here. And I went out to like Wall Street people trying to raise money and was literally laughed out of the room because are you kidding me? I would never put any of my stuff outside of my computer or my office.
Right.
I ended up basically just working with a couple college buddies. We built like the first like really great GUI web mail client, made a couple of tactical errors. It was like Gmail before Gmail, but decided instead of going to the business side and charging, that she's still there. I look frozen in the video.
Yeah, you are frozen. I'm not sure.
That's weird. That was an
Okay.
awkward. Okay.
There it is.
Instead of if I had gone to the business route and just sold to businesses, I think there would have been a really good business there. Or if I just made it free and raised money, I think there would have been a really good business there. Instead, I went right in the middle and I was selling to consumers. I was like, why would you use a shitty product like Hotmail when you can have a great email client and pay only $40 a year? And I like got it to $200,000 or $300,000 in revenue. And it literally paid me a salary for a decade to build other startups, but definitely was like a degree off on hitting the much bigger company.
Yeah. What did you do next? I'm trying to figure out like how.
Then I had an
your
idea.
path.
You'll see I had this idea in 2004 for that like all news would come in via like signals from people you knew, not from like the New York Times. And it would like pull together. And this was really like where I made all the classic mistakes. I like overbuilt. I made the most beautiful thing ever with every line of code being perfect. But I did it like where you would basically say, I like this article or not. And an algorithm would basically find related articles. And like, I just missed the like social aspect of it, which Twitter and Facebook obviously figured out. That totally bombed. And then we started the first version of the first incarnations of Runwise. And simultaneously I started an app that basically, I'm a big journaler and I would notice that if I like passed a place I'd been years ago and I could find the photo of being there, it was like it had some context. So this app that would surface memories from years ago, we and Time Hop became like the two big like X years ago apps. We had like shit ton of like users, and then Facebook copied it, basically killed us and Time Hop in one fell swoop. But one feature we had that others didn't have was we would use the geotags in the photos to say, hey, these three friends took photos at this place when you were there 2 years ago. Do you want them? And you could request them. And that was like a really popular feature. So when Facebook like basically destroyed our growth, we were like, I wonder if there's an app in that. And we created this app. This was before Snapchat, that basically you would push a button on the iPhone and close the app and you would choose which friends to share with. And every single photo you would take would instantly, like with your normal camera, get shared to that group of friends. It's very voyeuristic. It got some traction in high schools and colleges, but like never blew up because I think people were just like afraid of what would happen when something accidentally gets shared, that shouldn't have been shared. But we then started noticing, holy crap, like all of a sudden we'd see 500 users get on the app and then take like 2,000 photos and then disappear. And we're like, that's super weird. What is this? And we found out that people had figured out it was like the best way ever to get all the photos at a wedding. And so we pivoted the product, made it paid at $100, and basically started, this is where I learned cold emailing, like basically started cold emailing brides. My co-founder was female and we like wrote a really good cold email and went from 0 to 1 million in revenue in a few months. And then we accidentally emailed somebody from the Knot and they were like, oh, this is pretty cool. Why don't you come in? And we went in and they bought us. And that was that company. But
So
yeah.
was that was that a significant liquidity event? Could you have hung it up?
Yeah, it was like a
Just
base. It was like a base hit. It was
okay.
like, yeah, like it was a base hit.
It was
Investors,
validation towards all
but
the
it was
hard work you've been
validation that
doing.
was
Yeah.
there, and like also Runwise was starting to take off and whatever. But it like taught me a lot about acquisition process, and investors got their money back, and blah blah blah.
Huh. For the hating.
Yeah,
That I
it shows
guess
you the tides of. I always say the tides of startups turn so quickly. I was 30 years old and basically broke, unemployed, living with 12 roommates in a one-bedroom apartment. Right. And fast forward, like Runwise, obviously a very large company, and I've had some very significant raises and things so far. Yeah.
so you've been grinding on Runwise for quite some time now.
Yeah. Over a decade. Yeah.
I guess what have been some of the, I mean, you talked about the sales process and things like that, but what are some of the other big lessons or takeaways that you've had from that experience?
Oh, man. You got to surround yourself with people that are like the best at what they do, but complement the things that you're not the best at. My co-founders and I are all like incredible, will things to life, like vision, like salespeople, but we're not the like every detail, every box, every single thing is mechanized to the process. And we've been really lucky. We've hired a COO or CFO, a head of sales that are like that will complement us. And I think that's been a huge piece of our success.
It's fascinating. I'm just pondering what you've shared so far. What advice do you have for other startup founders or aspiring founders on?
Oh man, it takes 20 years probably to get good and be guaranteed success, or not even guaranteed, high probability, reasonably probability successful startups. So you really gotta love it because otherwise it's pretty brutal. I think the hardest part of doing startups, I always say, is you have to simultaneously believe unconditionally and question everything. And that is incredibly hard. You have to go out every day cheerleading like customers, potential employees, investors. And then you have to walk back to your desk and be like, okay, but what about what I'm doing is wrong? Right? How could it all be wrong? Could I be totally in the wrong direction? Could I be 8/9 in the wrong direction? That's a real hard, like psychological dichotomy to hold. Um, I'd say action bias towards action, better to move forward and make a decision and do something, even if it's not the right decision, than nothing at all. Complement yourself with people that like complement your skills. What else? Really make sure you're out there. Try not to build as little as possible. This is changing with AI in the sense that you can just build something in 5 seconds. So it's a little different, but try to figure out what are the hypotheses baked into my idea and how do I validate the hardest ones first and as quickly as possible, often without minimal building or with the shittiest thing possible, but you learn. So the faster you can learn, that is your only advantage against bigger companies is you can learn quickly and take risks to do that. And then just grit, man, just like showing up every day, like 10 years of people telling you they're an idiot. And like you watch your friends in finance making like $1 million a year and you're living in like a 1-bedroom apartment with 5 roommates.
And you're like,
gotta
what
keep
am I
showing
doing?
up like, yeah, what am I doing? I'm
Yeah.
insane. But just keep showing up every single day and believing in what you're doing and not taking no for an answer. And like, but also simultaneously being open to constantly getting feedback and trying to learn. And I think a growth mindset is critical. My friend always says fire makes the best fertilizer. When a house burns down and it makes the soil very fertile. Like, how do you like, because in entrepreneurship, you're mostly failing constantly. So like, how do you look at those and be like, okay, how do I learn from that and do better? How do I constantly get feedback to be better, to do better? But then having conviction on the things you truly believe and not taking no for an answer and running it to the ground.
So where do you get that grit from, that belief? It's almost like self-delusional.
There is some self-delusion there. I don't know, you like, it's a matter of, it's like you're drawing like a line, right? And like at the beginning of the line is like, you're looking for proof that other people are like really finding value in the problem and the solution. And then like at the other end of the line is like, how does this change the world? Right. And it's like, you need to get the traction in the beginning, but you also need to have a vision of where it's going to have something to believe in, to motivate people to know that this is worth working on. But if you just have the vision, you end up like never building the right thing, right? And you never get traction and it goes nowhere. And if you just have a little bit of traction, you end up building some small thing that like also never goes anywhere. And so you're always like trying to balance those things. And if you really have the vision, you wake up every day and like at Runwise, we wake up every day and we're like, every building we touch, we cut carbon emissions by 20 something percent, fossil fuel usage by 20 something percent. We're one of the largest carbon reducers in the world. We
Wow.
transform how people live and act in cities. Like we make cities fundamentally more affordable, sustainable, cleaner, easier to manage. That's like a pretty amazing thing, right? And it's like you get excited and all those shitty days where everything's not working, you say, but no, I am not going to stop until this vision comes to reality.
So what do you see as a grand vision for Runwise then?
I think the grand vision is that there is an operating system that runs every building in the world. And the result of that is dramatically lower cost of living, dramatically safer and more comfortable living, and dramatically cleaner and lower emission cities across the world.
Who is your like ideal customer profile at Runwise?
We work with pretty much most of all the largest owners in the world. If we're related for service like residential, Moynier, Lafrac. Come to New York City, we do all the MTA, LIR, NGT buildings. Like it's really mostly just owners and operators of real estate assets in various forms. That could be municipalities, could be nonprofits, could be rental companies, could be condos and co-ops. It really doesn't matter.
So it's across the spectrum on any building that's got like a master boiler chiller of a certain
Yeah, I mean,
size.
it's basically any type of building over 6 units has some central systems, whether it's water, electric, heating, cooling. We will run those better.
I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on the office market and how that, because I saw something today, I think it was on Instagram about two buildings and we'll call them skyscrapers, but tall buildings in Denver that sold for $3 a foot. Like, I know it's not one-to-one directly applicable, but it's fascinating to see these assets trade because they're functionally obsolete in their current form and they've got to be turned into apartments, I guess. Like, what are your thoughts on the changing landscape of commercial real estate, I guess is the question.
So I think everything moves in as a pendulum, right? The pendulum was everybody's in the office 100% of the time. Then the pendulum was nobody's ever going to be in an office, right? And now the pendulum is some people will be in office and some people won't. I think there's opportunity in the sense that I think offices will exist for a very long time. And in some places, those assets are still undervalued. There are other opportunities in being able to transform buildings that can be transformed into residential because my God, this country needs more housing. Well, I think those are all opportunities. With that said, so I think in 50 years, like we're going to vast majority of people are going to be going to offices. Probably not. I think when you look at our technology, AI and distributed intelligence, smartest people all over the place. So you're really going to constrain yourself to a local place when you have AR glasses that it can look like you're standing right next to the person. I think you'll probably see more like AWS for offices be a thing where I think in an ideal world, it's today, the 5 of us want to get together on our team or 12, push a button and it's triangulates the location, makes a pod that's the space just needed for this group and finds the central location we all agree to go to. And you show up that day and you pay by the hour, right? Like a hyper WeWork. Well, I think that's years away, just to be clear. But, I think that's where things are going. And, but in the meantime, there are definitely we've been all the way over here on one side and then all the way over here. We're probably moving back over here for the time being.
Yeah. I feel personally being in the office because that's where you can come and actually get some work done and not have the distractions of home life.
Totally. Yeah.
So I guess, how are you integrating AI? Is it large language models, LLMs, or is it machine learning? What's your take there?
We are really the bridge. So if you look at all the largest companies in the world, they're not actually the AI companies. They're actually the bridge between AI and the physical world. So Apple is the bridge between AI and essentially communications. Tesla is the bridge between the driving world, the locomotion world, and the AI models, right? We're the bridge between the AI and the physical structures we live and work in, right? And that means that every aspect of that building that can be run with intelligence, you need a physical layer that's incredibly fast and cheap to install that can drive AI models. And that's really what we do, whether it's running the heating system more intelligently or detecting a leak in a pipe or optimizing the thermostats or how the elevators operate. There are like a million different things you can optimize. You need physical interface to that. And we are the combined software hardware. And ultimately the goal is to allow any startup to come in and be able to deploy applications in tens of thousands of buildings and instantly, no CapEx or minimal CapEx, using all kinds of new AI solutions that were never financially feasible historically because the just high CapEx cost of installing stuff made it untenable.
Yeah, the thing I was thinking about as you were speaking is security. Like, has Runwise looked into anything along security solutions or maybe being the bridge to other security solutions?
Not yet, but it's definitely something we've thought about.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This has been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, thank you so much for having me, what you're doing. And I learned by listening and reading entrepreneurs who came before me. I think it's an awesome thing to keep doing for the world.
Awesome. Thanks again. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah. Nice meeting you.
All right. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
That's it for the Stashcast. Subscribe, share, and stay ahead in commercial real estate and prop tech. See you next time.